We should be recording. So, hello. You told me that you were vegan. How long have you been? I'm sorry. You told me that you've been vegetarian. How long you been vegetarian for?
For 8 years, I think.
8 years. Okay. And what made you go vegetarian initially?
I think it was just a deep feeling of injustice when it comes to the treatment of animals, and my general love for animals kind of, sort of made me feel disgusted at myself when eating meat.
Awesome. Yeah. I would say I'm vegan for the same reasons. It's ethical reasons primarily. So, you said that you are ethically convinced that veganism is superior, but you are not vegan yet. And can you explain again in what ways you're not vegan? You told me that you ate some non-vegan food that your mom makes every once in a while. In what other ways are you not vegan? Do you also buy non-vegan food sometimes?
I don't usually buy non-vegan food. Ever since I've moved out, it's become a lot easier to sustain a vegan diet in everyday life. But occasionally, I will find myself in situations where other people are preparing food um, for me, or I will be invited, and don't have necessarily the last say on what is cooked, and then I will usually just blend in and potentially eat non-vegan food. What I don't do is ever eat meat. That's like a boundary I've sort of already established for myself.
Gotcha. So you don't eat animals, but the products of animals you do eat. And do you are you a vegan in other areas outside of food? For example, do you use any other animal products for clothing, for example?
I do usually not buy anything new, so if I ever have any animal clothing, it's usually secondhand. Um, and I generally try to buy sustainable products that
Okay, gotcha.
hopefully don't involve any animal. Um, yeah.
That's good. So you told me earlier that you didn't see veganism as a moral obligation intrinsically or something like that. Can you tell me a little bit about what you meant by that?
I mean, I do see veganism as or the vegan diet as morally superior in the sense that not following a vegan diet uh, gives rise to extreme amounts of suffering, and morality, sort of viewing morality in a utilitarian sense where um, well-being is something we should strive for, and the maximization of it. And
Would
in
you say
that context,
you are a utilitarian? You consider yourself utilitarian?
oh yeah, yes.
Okay.
I don't obviously always judge situations from a utilitarian point of view in everyday life. Usually, there I would sort of um, go more for like a rule utilitarianism where I just sort of follow the pre-established rules that are laid out by society. But in
Okay.
general, I do view the foundation of all morality in a utilitarian sense, where just based on the way the moral compass has evolutionarily been established within the human condition, is it's based on on our desire for well-being.
Okay. Would you say that you believe in like deontic rights as well as in maximizing utility, or do you only your moral system you only consider minimizing suffering and maximizing well-being?
Well, it's sort of I would differentiate between what I believe in principle and what I act out in practice, uh, because obviously utilitarianism is not always cannot always efficiently be translated into practice. In practice, I keep to more of like a rule-based framework, because obviously,
Okay.
like, recalculating the amount of well-being that will arise before every choice I make, every action I do, is impossible. And
Sure, I know, I get what you mean. I also, like, I have a system in which I take into consideration both rules and utility. I lean more towards something called threshold deontology, which is similar to rule utilitarianism, but it's different in some ways that I can't really articulate right now. But like, for example, would you say that you believe in human rights? Do you think it's wrong to just murder people needlessly, like, or like painlessly, just to murder somebody? Like, you won't affect utility. You just take the somebody's life without a reason. Do you think that's wrong?
I mean, because this murder can potentially prevent this person from experiencing good experience in the future, this could be wrong, both wrong and right, considering that this person could also potentially in their future experience good, bad things. And so, I think there is an objective answer to that question, when put in this in the context. But I don't think we can ever find out that objective answer, because it is, connected to all these complex reasons for why this person's surviving would bring about more well-being or more suffering.
Sure. Yeah, I get what you mean. Like, we can't tell objectively, but from subjectively, from your point of view, do you think human rights are important? Like, for example, uh, protecting people from being murdered, abused, enslaved, things like that.
Yeah, that's, that would be like one of the frameworks of rules that I would definitely advocate for, considering that, generally, I think we can all agree those rules seem to maximize well-being and minimize suffering. Um, I mean, human rights are really, they really seem to, yeah. I don't know if that's.
Sure. Yeah, and you would be, for example, against a human holocaust, right? You think that's definitely wrong?
I mean, it's, I don't think it's definitely wrong. I don't have an objective answer to these questions because it's so complex that I can't find out the answer. I think there is an objective answer when we're taking the premise that we want to maximize well-being. We can objectively say whether an action maximizes this well-being or not. Well, actually, we can't objectively say this because we don't have the information, but there is an objective truth out there.
Yeah, I
I-
get what you mean. Like, it's difficult to answer these questions from a meta-ethical perspective, but from your normative ethics, per se, which is, you said, is something like rule utilitarianism, you would say it
yeah,
is wrong.
yeah, I
Like,
would say that it is wrong. Sure.
sure, of course, it is immoral to Holocaust people, right?
Well, it's not. I the way I view it is that what is immoral is objective in principle, but then, putting that principle, that system into practice is difficult. So using a different system that can effectively or most efficiently model whatever is true in principle is useful. And so, that this will of course not always um, lead to the most moral or the best actions possible, but on average it will lead to the most effective or most efficient possible way of reaching well-being. So
Sure.
I don't think that this new moral framework that we put into practice is then determining what is moral and immoral. I think there's still like an objective moral and immoral
Sure, like
action out there, but
when I ask you if it's moral, I just take that to mean, do you think it's wrong? Like we shouldn't do that.
I think we shouldn't do that because I think it effectively adds more suffering to the
Of
overall
course.
experience.
Yeah, and that's
So
all I take it to mean, just from your
homicide
point of.
is
Sorry, you need to take a call or something.
no, that was just sorry, my
Okay, cool. So yeah, I just take it to mean that you, from your point of view, you see it as a wrong thing to do. So what do you think about an animal holocaust in this case? Do you think it would also be wrong in the same way it is wrong to holocaust humans, or do you see a morally significant difference there between both?
I mean, I do think there is a very clear difference between human experience and animal experience. Not that I know this for sure, obviously, because experience is subjective and you can't ever know somebody else's experience. But just considering the general idea that potentially what conscious experience is something that arises from the complexity of the brain. Looking at the different levels of complexity, it seems reasonable to assume that animals have a less complex experience. And so, of course, they still have an experience and they still have a positive and negative experience. But I think the amount of suffering and well-being is potentially less complex. And so,
Sure. Yeah, but you would say they are conscious as well, right?
of course, I mean, and by conscious, what that would mean in this context is that they have an experience. Of course, they have an
Yeah,
experience.
like I take consciousness or sentience to mean like the capacity for subjective experience. So yeah,
Yeah.
and would you agree, like in the same way that animals, you said they have less complex experience than us, there are also some humans that have less complex experience than other humans, like for example the intellectually disabled.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and you wouldn't say it is okay to treat those people in the same way we treat farm animals, for example, right?
No, I would not say that it is right to treat those people like we treat farm animals. In fact, I would say that treating farm animals like farm animals is wrong. So it's
Awesome.
um
So we agree there then. Like factory
absolutely
farming is just definitely wrong.
it's absolutely very wrong.
Yeah. So the way we are farming animals, like on a mass scale, and basically holocausting them, you see a clear, you see that as clearly a wrong thing.
Yes.
Sure. So what kind of animal products would you say are not products of something that you would find wrong? Like you yourself, you find yourself consuming a certain animal products. So which do you think are okay, are ethically okay?
Well, first of all, consuming animal products, in a way that I view it personally. What I'm doing by not eating meat, by not eating animal products, usually it's not really, I'm not really saving animals through this in a direct sense. Like I'm not, one person cannot really impact the economy in that way. And
Would you
so,
say would you say, let me challenge you on that, like you said one person can't make a difference?
no, a person can make a difference, but not as a
Like this would apply
as a
as well, something like
factor.
voting for. Sorry.
Yeah, but sure, and that's but that again, it's not the single person making the difference; it's an accumulation of people. And so, as a single link in the chain, as a single being, you're not important. You become important as when you are a link in a link in the chain, basically.
Sure.
But
So let me challenge you on that. Like you said, an individual person per se can't make the difference. But why would that matter? Like for example, if you find something to be wrong, like even if the whole world is doing is participating in something that is wrong, why does that give you doesn't that give you the responsibility to not follow the crowd? Wouldn't you say that you have
Exactly. I'm all for following your own convictions, moral convictions, um, if only to, to minimize your own feeling bad about yourself, because that's something that has happened to me. I felt bad about eating meat suddenly, and then not eating meat has helped me not feel bad about myself.
Of course, yeah.
Um,
Like we don't feel like hypocrites anymore. We're not participating in something that we find
and
wrong.
another positive aspect is obviously if you um, basically practice what you preach, you obviously reach more people and potentially convince them to consider your arguments and to turn their life around as well.
Sure. So in that way, like a
And
person
then
can
so
definitely
suddenly
make the
you do
difference.
have an impact. In this sense, a person doesn't make the difference. A person plus other people make the difference. It's always in sort of communication and conversation with other people that you make the difference. It's never you yourself. And so whether I consume
Sure.
the sausage or not will not effectively change whether a pig is murdered or not. That will, because it's such a complex economy surrounding meat and every farming of animals. It's not like I can have that direct impact. The impact is only there when it's a net of people communicating and
Sure. So, but wouldn't you say that we have the individual responsibility to not participate in something that's wrong, even if the our impact is small?
yeah, I think so, which is why I do, try to at least as much as I'm willing, I guess, to reduce my negative impact or my
Sure.
imagined negative impact.
Sure. Like that's what veganism is. At the end of the day, it's just like taking individual responsibility for for some like. To in not participating in something that we find to be wrong, and if more people did this, like the only reason these industries exist in the first place is because individual consumers are willing to consume those products and to participate. They're like pretty much voting with their money. So you would agree, like if less people participated in those industries, they wouldn't exist anymore.
I guess so.
Sure. So, like, I actually see as a moral obligation to, like, I see veganism as the moral obligation, and I see participating in animal cruelty wrong, and it doesn't matter when the not really without the context mattering. Like, if you're in a survival situation, that's another thing. But if we have other options, I see it as definitely wrong. So, in what ways would you say are you participating right now? And let's see if. Let's have a discussion about that. Like you said, first of all, you're like tell me the ways sorry, my English is not the best. I'm from Puerto Rico. My first language is Spanish.
Well, good, good.
Yeah, so
Um,
tell me again, like in which ways you do are you not vegan yet?
yeah. So my family owns an old farm, and we have chicken at home. And so whenever I come home, I do tend to eat the meals that my mother prepared using those eggs.
Okay, so you consume eggs sometimes.
Exactly. The eggs of the chicken that we hold hostage.
Yeah, and you don't see that as something wrong.
I do think that generally the domestication of animals is, you know, obviously not ideal. It does lead to potential suffering. But then, looking at animals in the wild, it seems quite obvious to me that that's not necessarily a better alternative. I mean, animals are under constant threats of natural other animals, and not finding food, starving, being eaten, being falling victim to cold weather or things like that. So it's really a lot of suffering
Definitely, yeah,
in
I
that.
agree with you.
And then these animals that we now hold as farm animals and have domesticated would not be capable necessarily to survive in the wild. I do think that producing or putting animals into this world just to you know treat them badly, get their products and eat them, um, isn't right.
Sure, like I agree with you there. Like wild animal suffering is horrible, and when the whole world hopefully goes vegan, that's an issue that we have to discuss as well. Like which ways to reduce the suffering that goes on in the wild. But like you wouldn't you see like what people do with chickens even in small farms? Wouldn't you see it as exploitation?
Well, I mean, to me, it's not so much about like fairness or even I don't even value animal life necessarily. The only thing really that drives what I view as right and wrong, at least that's kind of what I tell myself, is the fact that it either maximizes well-being or maximizes suffering. So those are the two. The only circum or metric we're looking is really just experience and how, whether it's a good experience or a bad experience. And so
What
if
would you
if,
say?
if
Like, let me challenge you about that. Sorry for cutting you off. Were you gonna say something else?
I was just going to say that if the exploitation of chicken increases their discomfort and their negative experiences, then I would say it's wrong to do so. If it doesn't, I don't see a reason for not doing it.
Sure. Like we can ask. Like there's a couple of things that we can ask about that. Like first of all, like that's for the empirical. Like there's the empirical fact of whether or not it does increase suffering, and then
Absolutely.
also like you said that you don't value animal life per se. What you value is the utility. So would you say that the same thing about human life?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think that murder is inherently wrong, for example. I think it's only wrong when it produces more suffering than well-being.
Okay, so you wouldn't think it's wrong to just kill somebody behind their back with in a way that they don't feel any pain?
That really just it really, the only thing it depends on is whether that action will increase suffering or well-being. And this does not only take into account the immediate suffering in this certain situation, but all future suffering. Because uh, kind of how I see it, and or how I experience it at least, is that causality is sort of like a net, or a sort of a strand passing through time. And so then one thing causes another, and the sort of effect of one action will sort of change the whole, like the butterfly effect, or the chaos theory. That So it's sort of however we act today will determine all of the future states of the universe in a way.
Okay, I get what you mean. So you would say that killing a person per se is not that action per se is not wrong. Like what would be wrong is indirectly the suffering it causes to others, like to family members, for example, and stuff like that.
Well, that the suffering is wrong, but if it is outweighed by the well-being, it's not wrong. So if you kill somebody, potentially, and their family suffers and this person suffers, but leaving that person alive would have led to that person making so many more people suffer in the future, then killing that person would be the right thing because the well-being that increases through killing this person is greater than the suffering that increases.
Okay, can you explain that again? Like you said that like the if somebody were to cause suffering or something like that, if it was a bad person, or did I misunderstood that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not sure if you could really call somebody a bad person necessarily.
Yeah, like what I mean by that is,
Really,
somebody who rapes children, something like that. That we could agree that's bad. Like, for example.
yes. I mean, again, not inherently bad.
Sure, from your
There,
normative ethics.
yeah.
Yeah. So, like, what about somebody who, for example, were to have a life of net suffering, for example, like somebody who was had a predisposition to depression, was always on a bad mood, and that person didn't really have any friends or anything, so nobody would miss him if that person goes, if that person dies. Would you say in that case it would be, morally permissible to end that person's life?
Yeah, I mean, there's really the only rule here is if ending the person's life maximizes well-being, then go ahead. Or if it minimizes suffering, I guess that's kind of the same thing, just a different way of.
Okay, so you don't see like anything intrinsically wrong with just killing the person and going against their will to live. You don't see anything wrong per se with that. It's only with the utility, right?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? I don't want to mischaracterize you.
No, that's exactly what I mean. I don't. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, my emotional response is a different one than this sort of logical one. Um, I would never kill a person. um, but like logically, I think there are circumstances in which it makes sense.
Okay, and that would be a circumstance in which it would make sense to you if the a life would be of net suffering. You wouldn't see anything wrong with just terminating that
Ending
life,
it.
even if
No.
the person was innocent, and even if it was like
I
wasn't
mean,
causing
what?
any suffering to other people.
Well, they're causing suffering to themselves essentially. By living, they are suffering. So really, the claim that they're not causing suffering to other people is only correct insofar that it's not. But there this life produces suffering, and so any life that produces more suffering than well-being is essentially better. It's morally better to end this life. But it's not like I would ever suggest putting this into practice because of the
Yeah,
complexity of
there's
all of
there's
this. It's not
practical reasons.
foreseeable whether this person will actually continue to um, produce more suffering than well-being. So it's really all very.
Sure, it's just a hypothetical. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what about if we were to trade equalize a human being to a chicken? Would you say that it's fine to pretty much exploit that chicken and enslave it pretty much for their products? Would you say it's okay to do the same thing with a human, for example, that has the same level of intelligence?
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure if it matters whether I understand what you're saying, because my response is going to be the same every time. I'm always going to say if it increases well-being, it should be done. If it doesn't, it shouldn't be done. So it's this is sort of
Okay,
the
okay, okay. Yeah, so I
um
have I have like a perfect hypothetical to ask you then, if that's the case. So like, let's say for example we were to breed a group of humans, like for example another race of humans, and just keep them in a state of like we would keep farm animals, but we would give them overall positive lives with like overall positive. Like, would you say that would be a good thing ethically if we were to
yes.
kill them all at the end for food?
Absolutely. That would be a good thing, because it increases the overall well-being. And if as soon as it doesn't increase the overall well-being anymore, I think it's a bad thing. So it's yeah, I think I will stay consistent with this claim, whatever that.
Cool. Yeah. So you're totally consistent on that point. I like your intellectual consistency. You would say it's okay to like, for example, enslave a whole race of humans if we gave those humans like overall a positive life.
Yeah, not just it's not just those enslaved humans need to have an overall positive experience. It's that through this enslaving of people, the overall experience of every conscious being has to be, like the overall, not just for these people. You get me. I don't know why I'm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get what you mean. So, like, for example, if
Yeah.
we were to bring back the transatlantic slavery of black people, like in this hypothetical, like for some reason it would increase like the utility of all conscious creatures. You would say that that would actually be morally permissible.
I think that would be morally permissible, yes.
Okay, so you're totally consistent in that, like you in your normative ethics there,
I
like.
do I do have emotional hiccups here and there where I think, me saying this is wrong. I shouldn't be saying this. Of course, I because of my of the way I'm obviously sort of acting in this world, and I'm sort of educated. I do feel as though life is intrinsically valuable, and people should be free and do, because I do value freedom, obviously, on some level. I do value life on some level, but when it comes down to it, the core value that inspires these values is well-being. And so, um,
Okay.
whenever me valuing freedom or me valuing life is inconsistent with this core value of maximizing well-being, then I think these values can be shoved aside in order to, um, I don't
Yeah,
know if that.
so like I would think that actually if you said that you feel a certain way, but like your normative ethics points you out in a different direction, like wouldn't you think that your actual values are like don't lie just at utility? Then do you think there's something
Of course,
else other than
of
utility?
course there's something else than utility that I value. I just think I think Sam Harris makes this argument at some point when values that you hold are inconsistent with deeper lying values that you hold. You can objectively say that keeping to those higher level values is would be wrong with regard to the deeper lying values. So, just because I do value well-being does not mean that I should always put my value of well-being, or no, just because I value, for example, freedom
Hello, do you
doesn't
hear
mean
me?
that I should always. Oh, yes, I do hear you. Did you,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
did,
I had to take a call from my girlfriend. I didn't hear you for like the past 10 seconds. I'm sorry about that.
oh, damn. Okay, no, all good. What did I say? What did you hear?
Yeah, so you were talking a little bit about how you value something else other than utility, like you because you
Yeah,
value freedom and you think like life has intrinsic value in some way.
yeah,
Was there anything
and
else?
yeah, what I was just saying is that I think it's Sam Harris who put forward this argument that you can have deeper lying values and higher lying values, and or values that are based on a deeper lying value, and then whenever these higher level values don't uh, are at odds with the deeper lying values, you can objectively say that the higher lying values should not be considered in order to fulfill the deeper lying values. And so, I of course I value freedom or life, but I only value these things because of my deeper lying value of well-being. And so, whenever
Yeah.
me valuing freedom or valuing life does not maximize well-being, I think I can shove these values aside and focus on the maximization of well-being. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
so like, have you heard about a moral normative ethical system, a threshold deontology?
Uh, Sorry, you're gonna have to repeat that.
Yeah, have you heard about threshold deontology, the normative ethical system?
Threshold deontology. I have heard of a deontological framework, not, I don't know what threshold.
Sure. Yeah. So threshold deontology, some people say it's actually pretty similar to rule utilitarianism, but the highest value is not utility. Like, we actually hold the two axiomatic values that we there's two axiomatic values that we hold. So there's utility on one end, but there's also deontic rights on the other. So we take both into consideration when
Mm-hmm.
determining which actions are right or wrong. So, for example, you've heard about the trolley problem, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're a utilitarian, you're committed to say that, for example, you would you would how do you say it when you turn the tracks uh, of the train?
I don't know. You.
Yeah, so that, like, there's a train and it's about to
Yeah.
hit five people. Like, would you turn the track so it only kills one people? The overall utility would be that you save five people. That it would be that would
Well,
maximize well-being.
exactly. Only if saving those five people maximizes well-being. Now we can sort of imagine a scenario in which that wouldn't be the case. For example, if the one person that we would kill instead would later on in his life come up with the cure to cancer. Now, obviously, the cure to cancer would relieve so many people of their suffering that now killing five people that will not do anything remarkable with their life instead of that one person is becoming the less or the better option in this.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So
Yeah,
let's keep it pretty
yeah.
simple for the hypothetical. Let's say that there are indeed five people that won't do anything remarkable, and there's this one person that also won't do anything remarkable. Would you say that murdering that one person to save the five, that would actually be okay? That would
Yeah,
actually better think ethically.
absolutely.
Okay, so you don't see anything wrong per se with just murdering one person to save five.
I don't see anything wrong with murder if it doesn't maximize suffering. So if it maximizes well-being to murder this one person, then
Okay,
being consistent with
sure.
my worldview, I would absolutely be for that.
Like, in order to be consistent, you would have to say yes also to a scenario in which, for example, there were five people in the hospital. They needed some organs or whatever.
Yes.
From your point of view, it would be okay to kill a random person in order to take their organs and save those other five people.
And again, only if it maximizes the overall well-being. And
Sure, if it
but
does.
yes, but yes, if it does, then of course.
Sure, yeah. So in a threshold deontology system, like, we take into consideration, like, at first, what outweigh the most important value is the deontic rights. So, for example, we would say it is wrong to just murder a person to save five, or to just randomly murder a person to take their organs and save other five people. But, for example, if the utility was large enough, like, there's a certain threshold. Like, for example, killing one person to save like 1,000 people, that would be justifiable for
All right. So
something like that.
where is the line, and how do you determine the line?
Sure, that's just like the dilemma of, like, when does a mound becomes a mountain. I don't really have an answer for that, but there is an answer, but I don't really have it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So would you say a system like that would be closer to your values, or would you have to think about that? You would still stick to rule utilitarianism?
I mean, I think that threshold deontology would probably reflect my emotional response to these sort of problems better, but you know, I am convinced that there is an actual that there are objective answers to moral problems, and that these are in fact based around utilitarianism. So, um,
Sure, so I know what you mean. You said you take your morality like so somebody like Sam Harris like is pretty uh like you would see a point of view like the Sam Harris point of view.
uh, sure, yeah. I mean, I'm not very sure about his claim that morality is actually an objective quality of the universe. I think
Yeah, he
that
somehow he makes the is ought gap. He crosses it somehow. Yeah.
which that's yeah, that's something that I would struggle with.
You're still
But
agnostic if that could be done.
yeah, and yeah, but I do think that based on the fact that we can all agree that morality is something, you know, um, correlating to the amount of well-being or suffering that is there at any given moment, I think we can make objective claims based on that premise.
Okay, yeah, I get just interesting topics. You know, we got a little bit off topic, so let's just bring it back to the like whether or not those chickens are in fact experiencing a net positive or not. Like I think they're actually not experiencing a net positive. What argument would you make in favor of there being a net positive in the lives of the chickens that, for example, your family farms?
I mean, I'm no expert on animal welfare or brains as well, but just um yeah, I really don't know. My sort of gut feeling tells me that a chicken, that keeping chicken in an enclosed space without light, without sunlight is a bad idea. Um, but then keeping a chicken just running around as it pleases, dropping an egg here and there occasionally, being fed on a widespread farmland, with its chicken friends, is probably not a bad experience for the chicken overall. I would I would guess.
Okay, yeah. So the best arguments that I've heard about it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You do live in farms, so like first of all, I think it's wrong for the same reasons I would find it wrong in the case of a human, like with a similar amount of intelligence. But another argument that I've heard is that chickens actually, for example, in the wild, they don't lay so many eggs. Like we bred these chickens to lay, like for example, an egg a day or something like that, right?
Hmm.
Sure.
Well, but
And
I mean, what does that specifically? I mean, that doesn't necessarily correlate to any positive or negative experience, unless you are making the claim that laying an egg is inherently a negative experience for the chicken.
no,
Or
actually, is that they become very deficient in things like iron when they're laying so many eggs. So what some vegans say is that you actually have to feed those eggs back to the chicken. So if you're actually taking those eggs away from the chicken, you are going to make those chickens deficient in certain nutrients, and they will actually end up becoming sick, and you know most people end up killing those chicken when they can't lay any more eggs. Like, what would you say about that?
well, I mean, again, I'm not in any way advocating for the consumption of eggs that increase suffering. Um, I can really only justify my my consumption of our own eggs through sort of the naive sort of belief that these chickens are happy chickens, and you know definitive evidence on the fact that they might have a bad experience would
Yeah. So
really put me in a position of having to to come around on my belief and either accept that I act immoral and inconsistent or change my behavior, which is something I'm definitely
Sure.
considering every time I'm home and about to eat an egg.
Yeah, so would you like what would you say about, like, for example, if you were to find out that that was the case, that is true, that those chickens, like, they're experiencing all sorts of deficiencies and they're getting sick, like, and the only way for that not to happen to them is to feed those eggs back to those chickens. So in that case, you would say it is wrong to just take the chickens from them.
To just take the eggs. Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry,
mean,
yeah.
it
The
depends.
eggs.
In the end, again, the only thing that matters is whether the overall amount of well-being is good. So I would kind of think about how far these consuming these eggs would bring myself good experience and good health, and my family good health and happiness, and having those chicken and taking those eggs, and how far that increases their good experiences, and then how far these deficiencies bring the chicken bad experiences. So it's all, and it should have turned out that the amount of suffering they go through because of these deficiencies is so great that not even the sort of amount of pleasure, or I guess convenience, that we have through being able to consume these eggs. I don't know how I started this sentence. um, anyway, you get the drift, maybe.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Like, so do you see it like a collective thing? Like, if it raises enough the well-being of your family in general, you don't even take into consideration the suffering of the individual, in that case, of the victim.
The suffering of the victim in that regard never matters to me. The What matters is the overall balance.
Okay.
So if even if the chicken now is suffering incredible amounts and my family now is suffering incredible amounts, but through some weird event, this has to happen in order for extreme amounts of well-being to unfold in the future, I would say that it is right for this to produce the suffering right now, because I'm taking it to consider, or I'm you in order for to say that something is definitively wrong or right, you have to take into consideration all amounts of well-being and suffering, including those that potentially come or don't come in the future.
Okay, yeah. So, and you would say that as well, like in the context of a human. Like, for example, if your family were to get like a slave or something and increase your well-being so much because your life would be so much easier, like, even if that person, like, was stripped away from their liberty, you would still say from that point of view it would be okay, ethically.
Yeah, if the well-being outweighs the suffering, I think the action is justified.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
don't
So
think
you.
that would be the case with keeping a slave.
Sure, I don't think it's even the case with keeping a chicken, actually, because like, I don't know how much you can just eat something else. Like, for example, that chicken, I think the suffering that the chicken is experiencing is enough to just for it to
which
be a moral obligation to not consume the products.
which would be something that I would question. And that's the I guess my as I've said before, my unresearched sort of naive belief, or questioning of this simple idea that the chicken is suffering, um, is what keeps me from saying no to the egg.
Sure, yeah, but if it would be the case, like, for example, like your family, like, hypothetically would be just like just very, like, well off without eating eggs. They just find something else to eat, and like, a chicken won't be suffering because of the deficiencies that laying eggs produces. Like, you would say that in that case, then you would have an obligation to not consume if that were the case. consume the eggs.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's just like a matter of empirics then. Like if that's the case, then you would say it is an obligation to stop doing that.
absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so like that's good. And like what other aspects that you mentioned that you weren't vegan in your life? You said that you sometimes end up eating like non-vegan in social occasions, for example, and stuff like that.
I mean, ever since coronavirus, I have not had many social occasions in which I could have eaten animal products. But generally before,
That's good for the
um,
animals.
exactly, yeah, I mean, coronavirus in general is, I feel like, very good for the environment. Um, so that's
Probably.
great. But then looking back at, situations beforehand where I'd be invited to, for example, a birthday party, and I've been told that, in this cake there's eggs and milk, I would probably still consume that cake. Um, just because it's, the immediate sort of benefit to myself is greater than the bad feeling about doing something that I, I, I'm not, I can't stand behind with my moral values. And then also sort of always at the back of my mind, the sort of, um, maybe a rational conviction that whether I eat this slice of cake or not, there's not actually going to be a chicken that suffers precisely because of me eating
Yeah.
this one slice of cake. Um, it's, I would have to keep this person that baked the cake from baking this cake and multiple more cakes before I would really, before, the effect of them buying the egg carton would ever be reversed. And, even if that person didn't buy the egg carton, another person would have bought an egg carton, or the supermarket would have simply dispensed of the egg carton altogether, because they accidentally produced one too many. Like they're so that's sort of, I guess, but that's, I would admit that this is not the ideal way, I guess, to think about things, because if I really thought like that,
Sure.
we suddenly could make a difference by abstaining. And so I do view this as a failure, as a moral failure on my, or judgment failure
So
on my
you
side.
would actually say that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that I act in accordance with my values at all times, at all. Honestly, like a lot of the time, I don't. And
Yeah. So and like if I can respond to that, like I would actually disagree with the first things that you say that you said. I think that we actually have the like a moral obligation to, like especially when we're in social locations, to abstain from those animal products and to pretty much like spread the message. I see it as a form of activism, like to show other people that like this lifestyle of veganism exists, and like we are very uh, we have some ethical principles that we're not willing to uh, to stray away from, even in for convenience or in social occasions like that. What would you say about that?
yeah, absolutely, I would absolutely agree with you, and I would say that I really don't have any reason not to spread the message in that circumstance, and potentially a moral obligation to spread the message and abstain from the cake. And so, I would, in this situation right now, in the state of mind I'm in right now, I would say that next time I'm offered a piece of cake in a social occasion, I will say no. But then, of course,
Awesome.
then of course there is the willpower and my own sort of lack thereof to take into consideration. Um, and when I have been in a state of clarity before, and kind of sort of told myself to do a certain things because I thought it was good, it would be beneficial to myself or to the world, I later on, in a less clear state of mind, still did the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. So
Sure. Yeah.
there's certainly like an amount of cognitive dissonance when it comes to making these decisions.
Yeah, and would you say that it actually might increase well-being? Like, for example, if you were to do that next time, like it would be like a form of activism, and maybe like you implant some ideas into people that vegans are pretty cool. They're they stand by their principles even when if it's inconvenient for them. Like, would you say that it is possible that it creates a overall well-being to do that sort of activism and to show that like vegans,
Of
can go
course,
to social occasions and stuff like that, and they can have a fun time, but they just say no to things that they find wrong.
of course, I think that could potentially have a positive effect. But so many things could potentially have a positive effect, and whether they actually do or don't is is to be discovered, I guess, in the future or not, or never discovered, because it's impossible to look through the complexity of reality, really. But then and like so, I'm not. I do think that it is right. It would be right of me to abstain, but yeah, I'm not sure whether I'm right about thinking it would be right. So I don't know. It's
What do you think it might be stopping you, like from like being all the way there, like thinking it is the right thing to do to just abstain from those things in social occasions?
really just convenience is the main reason. I think
So
personal,
you would give higher value to your own convenience than the suffering of the animals, for example.
not in general. I think, and that's the cognitive dissonance I experience, because generally I would say that I um I want to do the right thing, but then in a moment of cognitive dissonance, I still choose to do the thing that brings me more immediate gratification, because obviously all I do is really inspired by my desire to be well myself. And if I even if I don't always efficiently or effectively choose the right things to accomplish this, because when I eat a piece of cake with eggs or milk in them, I will later on maybe regret this and feel bad for it. um but like I can't. um yeah, I don't know.
Sure, yeah, and I think that it actually might be the case that if you were to align your actions with your values, you would end up actually going vegan. Like, for example, I think if you were to examine this issue closely, you would find out that the lives of animals are actually produce overall suffering, and you would end up saying no to eggs and stuff like that, even when it comes from your family. And like I think you would also find out that that the activism that you do by like abstaining from animal products in social occasions is actually higher than it produces higher well-being than just following your convenience, for example.
Yes.
Yeah, so like we've talked about like from a individual responsibility point of view from for a while. Like let's like if you value utility, let's ask questions about like the macro level of society. Do you think animal agriculture is obviously very harmful for the environment, for example, right?
Oh, yes.
Sure. So, like in a global scale, it is. You agree that it's one of the leading causes of environmental destruction and climate change and pollution and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for example, like as well, like pandemics such as this, like the COVID-19, they wouldn't even exist without animal agriculture, right? Like 75% of modern infectious diseases are zoonotic in origin, which means they jump from animals to humans.
Yeah,
Like, right?
I've heard that before. I'm not sure if Corona is an instance of this particularly as well, but I presume it's in some way related to our domestication of animals. So yeah,
Yeah,
would
so
agree that.
my understanding of it, like from what I've heard of scientists, like I don't know if you know about Dr. Michael Greger. He's big on like promoting plant-based diets. Have you heard that name?
I don't think so.
Okay, so like Dr. Michael Greger, he's a plant-based doctor, but he's also an expert on infectiology. Like he studies infectious diseases, and he wrote a really good book that's called "How to Survive a Pandemic." He talks about like the dangers of animal agricultures and their potential for pandemics, and like COVID-19, like the current scientific understanding, it did originate from animals, like either pangolins or bats, like somewhere in China.
Yes.
Yeah, so like we pretty much, I think we covered a lot here. Like what would you say about the those things we talked about, like personal responsibility? Like do you think you're maybe you see more of a reason to move towards veganism?
I mean, I think what we've covered are pretty much things that I've thought about before and that I was aware of before. Maybe, like really saying them out loud and having them in a direct conversation will increase the pressure um, in, complete. But yeah, the thing is, I still struggle to see and or to completely see the reason for not eating the eggs that the chicken that we keep ourselves provide.
Sure, yeah, it would come down
That
to
would,
the
yeah,
if it does cause overall suffering.
yeah, and unless I guess, and this might be the wrong way around. Maybe I should be precautious and sort of assume the worst to um, sort of make sure that there's definitely no error in my thinking. Um, but I do somehow assume that these chicken don't suffer overall. And then also what adds to it as well is that I of course I'm constantly in conversation about veganism and even vegetarianism with my family. Like that's like a lot of the discussions that we have around the dinner table are in some way related to this.
Have you been able to convince any of your family members?
Two of my sisters are vegetarian.
Cool. And is it because of you, or did they influence you?
No, they are. I was the first one, I guess. I'm the oldest, so I guess I have that sort of influence. But my mother is also very very aware, and like back at home, we sort of she only buys organic products. Um, sort of tries and avoid meat. A lot of the time, we have like plant-based food around the house anyway. But my brother and my other sister and uh, my stepfather, they still, um, sort of maybe this is too far reaching, but demand the meat occasionally. So um, that's
Sure,
sort of
I get that. Yeah, it's kind of frustrating sometimes.
yes, and that's what causes a lot of discussions, I guess, in the house.
Yeah, so I myself, like I've influenced like at least my girlfriend. Like she used to eat meat when I first met her, and she's now been like 2 years vegan, and also my mom. So
Nice.
yeah, that's pretty good that you've influenced, some of your family members towards a plant-based diet. Like, anyways, like I would say, like some, some closing statements here. Like, I personally, like I, from an abolitionist point of view of veganism, and I'm not a utilitarian myself, so I do see it as intrinsically wrong to just exploit the chickens, even if you're not causing overall suffering. I think it's just wrong to enslave beings like that, like whether they're humans or animals. And I would say that even from a utilitarian point of view, I think that uh, just taking eggs away from chickens does causes overall suffering because of those reasons of the nutrient deficiencies that they end up getting and the sickness that they end up getting. And from about the points in the social situation, I would say like the overall well-being that activism produces. Like I think that's a good enough reason for it to be a moral obligation to go vegan in public at all times.
Yeah, yeah. I would say with Dylan, I would probably. Uh, there we go.
I hope we didn't lose a lot of the conversation. It was pretty interesting what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were saying like yeah, like that's mainly the main difference between our both our moral systems. Like I am not a pure utilitarian. I do place value in deontic rights, like a right to life and a right to not be exploited. So that's the reason why I see it as wrong as to just keep animals and breed animals just to consume their products. In the same way, I would see it as wrong to breed humans, treat them as objects of some sort.
Yeah.
And I actually do see the pet industry as wrong as well. Like, would you disagree with that? Like breeding millions of pets just to be our friends. Do you see anything wrong with that? Like, are you a type of vegetarian where you do you hold the adopt don't shop, or you don't see anything wrong with the pet industry
Oh,
uh, per se?
I mean, I see something wrong with everything that increases suffering. And looking at the pet industry, there's certainly a lot of suffering going on, and I would say that the overall suffering is increased through it. So absolutely, I see
Sure,
something
like we
wrong with
would
it.
agree there then.
Yes.
Yeah, and uh, yeah, there anything else we could touch on?
Uh, I don't know. I don't have anything really. I haven't.
You don't have
Yeah, I
any
think.
like anything that you would want to ask a vegan about or anything?
Nothing in particular that.
Sure, like and like let me ask you this question: like if you were to live a life in which you harmed the humans, animals, or neither, which of the three would be better?
Neither, obviously.
Of course, like I think that's just veganism in simple terms right there. Yeah, so I think that's that's pretty interesting talking to you. Thanks for agreeing to have a debate.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Awesome, and like just to have a clear answer, like if you were to find out, like for like some evidence that it was the case that you were producing overall harm to those farm animals, you would say it's wrong, right?
Yes,
And if it was the case that you produce overall well-being for abstaining from eating animal products in public and doing that sort of activism, you also agree with me there that it would be the right thing.
yes.
Awesome, so that's pretty cool. Like have a great rest of the day. Like whenever I upload the video, I will let you know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Awesome,
You too.
have a great one. Bye bye.
Goodbye.